Part 1. The Reeds and the River. There is a moment just before waking, when the body knows that dawn is near, even though the eyes have not yet opened. It is not a sound that triggers this awareness, nor a shift in temperature, nor the movement of another person nearby. It is something far older than any of those things. It is the body's own internal rhythm, trained over years and years of rising at exactly the same hour, responding to the same invisible cue buried somewhere deep within the chest, a quiet pull, like a tide answering the moon. And this is how the day begins for a Spartan Hoplite living in the barracks of Laconia during a time of unbroken, absolute peace. Not with a shout, not with a trumpet, not with any urgency at all, but with a slow, almost imperceptible stirring of consciousness, a gentle surfacing from the dark well of dreamless sleep, rising upward through layers of stillness until the first true breath of the waking world fills the lungs and the eyes, at last drift open. The room is dark, profoundly, completely dark. There are no windows in the traditional sense, only narrow rectangular openings cut high into the thick stone walls. And through these slits comes nothing yet but the faintest suggestion of a sky that has not quite decided whether it is ready to turn from black to the deepest possible blue. The air inside the barracks is cool, not cold exactly, but cool in the way that stone holds the memory of the night long after the night itself has begun to retreat. It smells of old wood and dry earth, and beneath that, the faint vegetal sweetness of river reeds. This is the smell of the bed itself. The Spartan does not sleep on a mattress stuffed with wool or feathers. He sleeps on a pallet made from reeds gathered by hand from the banks of the Eurotas River, the great slow waterway that winds through the valley of Laconia, like a vein of silver carrying cold, clean water down from the mountains. The reeds are cut in late summer when they are tall and dry and stiff, and they are woven together into flat mats and layered one on top of the other to form a surface that is firm and unyielding beneath the body. There is no give to it. There is no softness. The reeds press into the back and shoulders with a gentle, constant insistence, and over time the body learns not to resist this pressure, but to settle into it, to let the spine align itself naturally against the hard surface, to let the muscles release their tension, not because they are cradled, but because there is simply nowhere else for the tension to go. It drains away slowly into the reeds, and through the reeds into the stone floor beneath. And what remains is a kind of sleep that is extraordinarily deep and extraordinarily clean, free of restless turning, free of the dull aches that come from sinking into something too soft. He lies still for a long moment, this hoplite, this man whose name does not matter, because his routine is shared by every other man sleeping in this same long room. There are perhaps 15 of them, arranged in 2 neat rows along opposite walls, each on his own reed pallet, each beneath a single wool blanket that is coarse and heavy, and dyed the deep, unmistakable red of Spartan cloth. The crimson is not bright. It has been washed many times in river water, and dried many times in the sun, and so it has mellowed into something closer to the color of old clay or dried pomegranate skin, rich and warm, but subdued, as though the color itself has been disciplined into quietness. The blanket lies across his chest and legs, and he can feel its weight, not burdensome, but present, a firm, grounding pressure that holds the warmth of the body close. He breathes. The air enters through his nose, cool and slightly sharp, carrying with it the mineral scent of stone, and he holds it for a moment in his lungs before releasing it slowly, through barely parted lips. This is the first conscious act of the day, a single breath, taken with intention. Around him, the barracks are almost perfectly silent. Almost. There is the sound of other men breathing in their sleep, a low and rhythmic murmur that rises and falls like a very gentle sea heard from a great distance. One man shifts on his pallet 2 rows down, and the reeds beneath him produce a quiet, dry whisper, a sound like a hand brushing slowly across parchment. Then silence again. The stones of the walls hold the quiet, like a vessel holds water, and the quiet itself has a texture, thick and soft and absolute, the kind of silence that exists only in places where people have learned, over generations, to move through the early hours without unnecessary sound. He sits up. The blanket falls from his chest and pools around his waist, and the cool air meets his bare skin immediately, a gentle shock that runs across the shoulders and down the arms. He is wearing nothing. The Spartans sleep unclothed, their bodies hardened to temperature through a lifetime of deliberate exposure. And so the coolness is not uncomfortable. It is simply information. The body registers it, acknowledges it, and moves on. He swings his legs over the side of the pallet, and his bare feet meet the stone floor, which is cold, genuinely cold, the deep and patient cold of stone that has not seen sunlight in many hours. The soles of his feet are thick and calloused from years of walking and running on hard ground, and so the cold is muted, distant, like hearing a sound through a closed door. He stands. The muscles of his legs engage smoothly, the quadriceps and hamstrings, and the deep stabilizing muscles around the hips, all working together in a coordinated effort, so practiced that it requires no thought at all. He is upright, he is awake, and the day, though it has not yet truly arrived, has begun. He reaches for the cloak. It hangs from a wooden peg driven into the mortar between 2 stones in the wall beside his pallet, and even in the near total darkness, his hand finds it without hesitation, guided by the same spatial memory that allows a person to navigate their own home without light. The cloak is heavy. It is made from thick Laconian wool, tightly woven and dense, and when he lifts it from the peg, he can feel the substantial weight of it settling into his hand and forearm. He swings it around his shoulders in a single, practiced motion, and the wool falls across his back and chest like an embrace, immediate and enveloping. The texture against his bare skin is rough, not painfully so, but unmistakably coarse, each fiber of the weave pressing its own tiny point of contact into the skin of his shoulders and upper arms. It is a sensation that never fully disappears, not even after years of wearing this same fabric. The body simply learns to carry it, to accept the constant low hum of texture as a companion rather than an irritation. He fastens the cloak at his right shoulder with a simple bronze pin, a fibula, its surface smooth and cool beneath his fingertips. And then he is dressed, if such a word can be applied to a single garment, and he is ready to walk. He moves through the barracks toward the door, with steps that are quiet and measured, his bare feet making almost no sound on the stone. The door is heavy timber, old and dark with age and oil, and it opens on leather hinges with a low, soft groan that is swallowed almost immediately by the vastness of the space outside. And then he's in the open air, and the world changes entirely. The sky above Laconia is enormous. That is the first thing the senses register every morning, the sheer, uninterrupted expanse of it, stretching from the dark bulk of the Taygetos Mountains to the west all the way to the lower, gentler ridgeline of Parnon to the east. Between these two mountain ranges lies the valley, broad and fertile and quiet, and above it the sky is a bowl of the deepest indigo, not yet touched by the sun, scattered with the last fading stars. The air is different out here. It is colder, sharper, carrying the clean green smell of olive groves and the faintly metallic tang of frost. And there is frost this morning. He can see it, just barely, as his eyes adjust to the darkness. A thin, silvery glaze lies across the leaves of the nearest olive trees, each leaf outlined in white, delicate and precise, as though every leaf has been individually painted by some impossibly patient hand. The frost catches the faintest available light and holds it, so that the trees seem to shimmer very softly against the dark background of the valley, a ghostly silver green that is impossibly beautiful and impossibly temporary, because within the hour the sun will rise, and all of it will melt and vanish, as though it had never existed at all. He walks the path down to the river. It is a path worn smooth by generations of feet, a narrow track of packed earth that winds gently downhill between olive trees and low scrub, and as he walks, he can hear the river before he sees it. A low, continuous murmur, the sound of water moving steadily over a bed of smooth, rounded stones. The Eurotas is not a violent river. It does not roar or crash. It speaks softly and constantly, a sound so steady and so even that after a few moments the ear ceases to distinguish it from silence. He reaches the bank, and the ground beneath his feet changes from packed earth to the smooth, cool surfaces of river stones, each one rounded and polished by centuries of flowing water, fitting against its neighbors, like the pieces of some vast, natural mosaic. He unfastens the bronze pin at his shoulder. The heavy crimson cloak slides from his body, and he catches it, folding it once, and sets it on a dry stone above the waterline. And then, without pausing, without bracing, without any visible preparation at all, he steps into the river. The cold is immediate and total. It seizes the feet and ankles and calves with a grip that is almost electric, a sharp, bright, overwhelming sensation that races upward through the legs and into the core of the body. The water of the Eurotas comes down from the high snow-fed springs of the Taygetos, and even in the gentler months, it carries a deep, fundamental cold that no amount of conditioning can fully prepare the body for. Each morning it is a shock. Each morning the lungs draw in a sharp, involuntary breath, and the muscles of the abdomen tighten, and the skin erupts in a wave of sensation so intense that for a single, brilliant moment, every thought in the mind is wiped clean. There is no past. There is no future. There is only the water, cold and clear and relentless, flowing around his legs as he wades deeper the stones beneath his feet smooth and sure. He lowers himself until the water reaches his chest, and then he submerges entirely, dipping his head beneath the surface and holding himself there for a long, suspended moment in a world of muted sound and absolute cold. The river moves around him and over him, and he can feel every inch of his skin alive, awake, singing with a clarity that nothing else in the day will match. He rises. The water streams from his head and shoulders, and the morning air, which only minutes ago felt cold, now feels almost warm against his wet skin by comparison. He stands in the shallows and breathes deep and slow, and the fasting clarity of his empty stomach merges with the electric alertness of the cold water to produce a state of mind that is extraordinarily clean, a profound and settled focus, as though every unnecessary thought has been rinsed away, and what remains is only the present moment, only the sound of the river, only the first pale, gold light beginning to touch the highest peaks of the Taygetos, as the sun, still hidden below the eastern ridge, sends its earliest messengers upward into the sky. He does not eat in the morning, no Spartan does. The body operates on the reserves of the previous evening's meal, and there is a lightness to this, a buoyancy, a feeling of being unencumbered and sharp, the mind clear as glass, the senses open and receptive to every detail of the world. He steps from the river onto the dry stones of the bank and reaches for the length of rough linen cloth that he carried folded beneath his cloak. It is not soft. It is a coarse, undyed fabric, almost abrasive against the skin, and he draws it across his arms and chest and legs with brisk, deliberate strokes, each pass pressing the texture of the linen into the wet skin, stimulating the blood, pulling warmth back to the surface. The skin flushes beneath the cloth, pink and alive, and by the time he has finished drying himself, his body is warm from within, a steady, self-generated heat that radiates outward from the core. He wraps the crimson cloak around his shoulders once more, pins it at the right shoulder, and stands for a moment looking east, where the sky above the ridgeline of Parnon has turned from indigo to a soft, luminous rose. The olive trees have lost their frost. The leaves are dark green again, glossy with meltwater, and somewhere in the branches a single bird begins to sing, a clear, unhurried melody that rises into the still air and hangs there unanswered. He turns and begins to walk. The path climbs gently away from the river toward the open ground where the training takes place, and with each step, his body settles deeper into its rhythm, the legs moving easily, the breathing even and slow, the mind entirely clear, entirely present, holding nothing but the quiet certainty that today, like every day before it, will unfold exactly as it should. Part 2. The Discipline of Iron. The training ground is a broad, flat expanse of packed earth, situated on a gentle rise above the river valley, open on all sides to the sky and the wind. It is not an arena. There are no walls, no stone seats for spectators, no architectural grandeur of any kind. It is simply a clearing, perhaps 200 paces long and half as wide, where the soil has been beaten down over generations of use until it is as hard and smooth as fired clay, a deep ochre surface that holds the impression of bare feet for only a moment, before the wind and the next footfall erase them. Around its edges grow a scattering of old olive trees, their trunks twisted into shapes that suggest centuries of patient endurance, and beyond the trees the land falls away toward the valley floor, where the Eurotas catches the early light and throws it back in long, shifting ribbons of silver. The air is still cool, but the sun has now cleared the ridge of Parnon to the east, and its light pours across the training ground in a wide, golden wash that turns the packed earth from ochre to something closer to amber, and lays long, soft shadows behind every stone and post and piece of equipment arranged across the field. He is not alone. A group of perhaps 12 men stand in a loose formation near the center of the ground, each one wrapped in his crimson cloak, each one barefoot, each one carrying the same quiet, unhurried stillness that comes from a body already awakened by cold water and an empty stomach. There is no commander barking orders. There is no need. Every man here has performed this same routine so many times that it has ceased to be something he does and has become something he simply is. The routine is the man. The man is the routine. And so the preparation begins, in silence, each hoplite moving to his designated starting position, with the calm, practiced ease of a craftsman, laying out his tools at the beginning of a long day's work. The first act of preparation is the oil. A large clay vessel sits on a flat stone at the edge of the ground, filled with olive oil, pressed from the fruit of the trees that grow on the surrounding hillsides. The oil is thick and golden green, and it carries the heavy, rich, slightly peppery scent of ripe olives, a smell so deeply embedded in the landscape of Laconia that it is almost indistinguishable from the smell of the land itself. He removes his cloak, folds it with care, and sets it on the stone beside the vessel. Then he dips both hands into the oil and begins to work it into his skin. He starts with the arms, pressing the oil into the muscles of the forearms and biceps with long, firm strokes, and immediately the skin changes character, taking on a warm, golden sheen that catches the sunlight and holds it. The oil serves many purposes. It protects the skin from the drying effects of sun and wind. It warms the muscles, encouraging blood flow and flexibility. And it creates a thin, smooth barrier that reduces friction against any surface the body might press against during the work ahead. He moves from the arms to the shoulders, then to the chest and the broad muscles of the back, reaching as far as he can and letting a training partner finish what his own hands cannot reach. The sensation of the oil being worked into the skin is deeply pleasant, a firm, spreading warmth that penetrates beyond the surface and settles into the tissue beneath, loosening what is tight, softening what is stiff. He oils his legs last, the powerful quadriceps, and the thick corded hamstrings and the calves that are dense and hard from a lifetime of running and walking on uneven ground. By the time he is finished, his entire body gleams in the morning light, the musculature defined and visible beneath the oiled skin, and the sun, which has continued its slow climb, is now warm enough that he can feel it pressing against his shoulders and the back of his neck like a gentle, constant hand. The first exercise is the sled. It sits at the far end of the training ground, a massive, low-slung frame constructed from thick oak timbers, joined at the corners with heavy bronze rivets, and fitted at the front with two uprights that serve as pushing handles. The base of the sled is flat and smooth, designed to slide across the packed earth, and it is loaded with weight. Several large stones gathered from the riverbed, each one dense and round and impossibly heavy. The total load is enormous. It is not a weight that can be moved quickly. It is a weight that can only be moved slowly, deliberately, with the full and coordinated effort of the entire body, working as a single unified system. He steps behind the sled and places his hands on the uprights. The oak is smooth, worn to a polished finish by countless hands before his, and it is cool beneath his palms. He sets his feet wide, pressing his toes into the packed earth, finding the grip that will allow him to drive forward without slipping. He lowers his hips until his thighs are nearly parallel to the ground. He draws a single deep breath, holds it for a moment in his chest, and then he pushes. He performs 20 of these repetitions, then sets the stone down and stands in the sunlight, and the warmth of the sun presses into his oiled skin, and the ache in his muscles is vast and total and deeply, profoundly satisfying. A warmth that radiates from every fiber of every muscle in his body. The training is finished. The sun is high now, fully established in a sky of the palest, clearest blue, and the valley below shimmers with heat and light. His body is spent. Every reserve has been drawn upon. Every muscle has been asked for everything it had, and has given it willingly. And what remains is a quiet, trembling emptiness, a hollowed-out calm that settles over the body like a second skin. The fast, which has lasted since the previous evening's meal, sits in his stomach as a clean, open lightness, and for the first time since waking, the body's need for food rises gently, but unmistakably to the surface of his awareness. He retrieves his crimson cloak from the stone where he left it, wraps it around his shoulders, and feels the rough wool settle against skin that is warm and oiled and flushed with the deep satisfaction of completed work. He turns toward the mess hall, and the hunger in his belly is not desperate or sharp, but patient and earned, a quiet fire waiting to be fed. The path from the training ground to the mess hall follows a gentle downward slope through a grove of old olive trees, whose canopy has grown so thick and so intertwined over the centuries that the light beneath them is permanently filtered, broken into a shifting mosaic of gold and green and soft gray shadow that moves slowly across the ground as the branches sway in the lightest of breezes. The earth here is softer than the packed clay of the training ground, darker, enriched by generations of fallen leaves that have decomposed into a thin, fragrant layer of soil that gives slightly beneath his bare feet, with each step, cool and yielding after the unyielding hardness of the ground where he has spent the morning. He walks slowly. The urgency of effort has passed, and in its place is a deep, pervasive fatigue that is not unpleasant, but that colors every movement with a heaviness, a deliberateness, as though the body has quietly renegotiated its relationship with gravity and found a new, slower equilibrium. The muscles of his legs, which only an hour ago were driving against the tremendous resistance of the oak sled, now carry him with a gentle, rolling gait, each step landing softly, each joint flexing with the careful economy of a body that has given everything it had and is now operating on the quieter reserves that lie beneath the surface of active strength. The air beneath the olive trees is cooler than the open ground, shaded and still, carrying the deep green scent of the leaves and the faintly sweet resinous fragrance of the old bark. And as he passes beneath the branches, the dappled light plays across his oiled skin, in patterns that shift and dissolve and reform with each subtle movement of the canopy above. There are other men on the path, walking in the same direction, each one moving with the same unhurried, heavy-limbed gait, each one wrapped in his crimson cloak, and they walk in a comfortable, companionable silence that requires no explanation and no effort to maintain. This is the silence of men who have known each other since boyhood, who have trained beside each other and eaten beside each other, and slept in the same long room for so many years that the boundaries between solitude and company have become almost meaningless. They are alone together, each man enclosed in his own private landscape of fatigue and hunger and quiet satisfaction. And the shared silence is itself a form of communication, an acknowledgement that words are not always necessary, and that sometimes the deepest form of companionship is simply the act of walking the same path toward the same destination at the same unhurried pace. The mess hall emerges from behind the last of the olive trees as the path opens onto a small, level clearing. It is a long, low building constructed from the gray limestone of the surrounding hills, its walls thick and unadorned, its roof made from heavy timber beams overlaid with clay tiles that have weathered over the years to a soft, dusty terracotta, mottled with patches of pale lichen that spread across the surface in slow, irregular patterns like maps of unknown territories. The doorway is wide and permanently open, fitted with no door, and from within comes the first indication of what awaits inside. It is a smell, and it reaches him while he is still several paces from the entrance, carried outward on a slow current of warm air that drifts through the open doorway like a long, steady exhalation. The smell is rich and complex, and deeply, almost overwhelmingly savory. A layered composition that the nose receives as a single, unified impression, but that the mind, given a moment, begins to separate into its constituent parts. There is the deep, heavy foundation of cooked pork, the sharp and slightly astringent bite of vinegar, the dark, ferrous undertone of blood, and beneath all of these, the warm, starchy, gently sweet bass note of barley that has been simmered for a very long time over low, patient heat. This is the black broth, the melasomos, the dish that occupies the absolute center of the Spartan communal meal, a thick, dark, intensely flavored liquid made by cooking pork slowly in a mixture of its own blood and vinegar until the whole preparation reduces into something that defies easy categorization. Neither soup nor stew nor sauce, but something entirely particular to this place, this people, this way of living. He steps through the doorway, and the interior receives him with a gentle, encompassing shift in atmosphere. The air inside is warmer than the air outside, heated by the cooking fire that burns in a long, stone-lined hearth at the far end of the room, and by the accumulated presence of the men who have already arrived and taken their places on the benches. The ceiling is supported by thick oak beams that have darkened over the decades to a deep, rich brown that is almost black, the grain of the wood visible in long, flowing lines that run the full length of each beam, and from these beams, the warmth and the smoke and the smell of countless meals have seeped into the wood until it has become saturated with the accumulated essence of this room's singular purpose. The light is soft and golden, entering through the open doorway and through small, high openings in the stone walls, falling in broad, quiet shafts that illuminate the slow drift of dust motes and give the interior a warm, amber tone that feels ancient and permanent, as though the light itself has been here for a very long time and has no intention of leaving. He makes his way to his place on one of the heavy wooden benches that run along both sides of a long central table. The bench is a thick plank of oak, worn smooth and slightly concave along its sitting surface by decades of daily use, the wood dark with age and the oils of countless bodies. And when he lowers himself onto it, the surface meets the backs of his thighs with a broad, firm, deeply reassuring pressure that draws from his body an involuntary settling, a release of tension so comprehensive that it feels almost like a sigh translated into the language of muscle and bone. The relief of sitting after the long morning of standing and pushing and squatting is extraordinary in its simplicity. The legs, which have carried and driven and stabilized for hours, are suddenly free of their burden, and the blood that has been pooling in the lower extremities begins to redistribute itself through the body, flowing back into the core and the upper limbs with a gentle, warm, tingling sensation that spreads slowly and evenly, like water finding its level. Before him on the heavy table sits a wide, shallow bowl made from local clay, fired to a dull reddish-brown, its surface unglazed and slightly rough to the touch. The bowl is filled nearly to the brim with the black broth, and he looks down into it for a moment, taking in the appearance of this extraordinary liquid. It is very dark, so dark that in the amber light of the hall it appears almost black, with a surface that catches the faintest reflections of the overhead beams in slow, oily shimmers that suggest both depth and weight. A thin veil of steam rises from the surface in delicate curling threads that carry the full intensity of the broth's aroma directly upward into his face, and the smell at this proximity is overwhelming in the most welcoming way, a warm and complex invitation that the empty stomach receives with a quiet, visceral urgency. Beside the bowl sits a piece of barley bread. It is dense and flat, roughly the size of a man's hand, made from coarsely ground barley flour, mixed with water and a little salt, and baked on a heated stone until the exterior has developed a firm, slightly charred crust, and the interior has set into a compact, chewy mass, with a nutty, toasted fragrance that is deeply satisfying in its plainness. The surface of the bread is rough, almost gritty, flecked with tiny fragments of the barley hull that survived the grinding process. And when he tears a piece from the round, the bread resists for a moment, before yielding with a soft, dry, tearing sound that is somehow deeply pleasant, revealing an interior that is pale and dense and faintly warm. He moves to his palate. His feet know the way without the help of his eyes, navigating the narrow space between the rows of beds with an accuracy that comes not from sight, but from the body's own spatial memory. The deep, unconscious map that is built over years of moving through the same space, in the same way, at the same hour. He reaches his place and sits down on the edge of the reed mat, and the woven reeds receive his weight with their characteristic firm, dry resistance. A sensation so deeply familiar that it triggers an immediate and involuntary relaxation, a signal sent from the surface of the body to some ancient pre-verbal center of the brain that says simply, "You are home, you are safe, the day is done." He unclasps the bronze fibula at his right shoulder, and the crimson cloak slides from his body with a soft, heavy whisper of wool against skin. He folds it with slow, meticulous care, bringing the edges together precisely, folding once, then again, then a third time, until it forms a thick, neat rectangle that he places at the head of the pallet. It will serve as his pillow. The wool is still warm from his body, and when he presses his hand briefly against its surface, he can feel that warmth held within the dense weave, a residual heat that will persist for some time, fading so slowly that it will still be faintly present when his cheek comes to rest upon it. He reaches beneath the pallet, and his hand finds the small clay pot. By touch alone, his fingers recognizing its shape and its cool, smooth surface, without hesitation, he draws it out and removes the wooden stopper, and the scent that rises from the opening is immediate and vivid, cutting through the heavier, warmer smells of the barracks, with a clarity that seems almost to have a color, a bright, sharp green note of wild thyme and oregano, steeped for weeks in thick Laconian olive oil, until the herbs have surrendered their essence into the liquid, and the two have become one. He pours a measure into his cupped palm. The oil is cool at first, dense and slightly viscous, and it sits in the hollow of his hand, like a small golden pool, catching the distant lamplight in a single soft point of reflection. He brings his palms together and works them against each other, spreading the oil evenly, warming it with the friction of skin against skin until it is slick and fragrant, and the same temperature as his body. He begins with his right leg. His hands settle onto the quadriceps and press inward with a slow, deep, circular pressure, and the oil sinks into the skin immediately, darkening it to a warm, golden sheen. The muscle beneath is dense and weary, still holding within its fibers the deep residual memory of the morning's labor, the tremendous sustained effort of driving the loaded sled across the packed earth. And as his hands work into the tissue, he can feel the specific signatures of that effort, small areas of tightness and compression, buried within the belly of the muscle like stones embedded in soft earth. He does not hurry. Each knot receives his full and patient attention, his thumbs pressing into the center of the resistance with a steady, sustained force that does not increase or decrease, but simply persists, constant and unhurried, until the fibers beneath begin to soften and yield, releasing their held tension in slow, incremental surrenders that produce a sensation of deep, spreading relief, a warmth that flows outward from the point of release into the surrounding tissue, like water finding its way across level ground. He moves downward to the knee, where the tendons are thick and taut, and works the oil into the spaces on either side of the kneecap with his fingertips, small, precise, circular motions that coax the stiffness out of the connective tissue and leave it warm and supple. The calf below is dense and hard, the fibers packed tightly from years of walking and running on uneven ground. And here the tension is deeper, more stubborn, requiring longer, more sustained pressure before it begins to release. But release it does, eventually, gradually, the muscle softening under his hands like wax held near a gentle flame. He repeats the process on the left leg, then moves to his arms and shoulders, working the oil into the forearms, where the rope work has left a deep, aching fatigue in the flexor muscles, and into the broad muscles of the back, where the effort of holding the heavy river stone has created a band of tightness that stretches from one shoulder blade to the other, like a yoke. The process is long and unhurried, each muscle group receiving the same slow, thorough, meditative attention. And by the time he is finished, his entire body is warm and loose, and gleaming faintly in the dim light, the skin soft and fragrant with the herbed oil, the muscles beneath quiet and heavy and entirely, profoundly at rest. He sets the clay pot back beneath the pallet and reaches for the other item that waits there, a leather sandal with a broken strap. He has been meaning to repair it for 2 days, and now, in the deep quiet of the evening, with the body at rest and the mind clear and unhurried, the task presents itself with a simplicity that is almost inviting. He draws out a thin strip of spare leather and a short bronze awl from a small pouch beside the sandal. The awl is cool in his hand, its point fine and sharp, and he turns the sandal over in his lap and examines the break by touch more than by sight, his fingertips reading the leather the way a blind man reads a face, finding the place where the strap has worn thin and separated from the sole. The repair is straightforward. He uses the awl to punch 2 small holes through the overlapping layers of leather, and the awl passes through the hide with a soft, yielding resistance, a quiet puncture that he can feel transmitted through the handle into his fingers. He threads the new strip of leather through the holes, pulls it tight, and ties it off with a simple, flat knot that sits flush against the surface of the sole. He tests the strap with a firm pull. It holds. The repair is clean and sound and will last for many months, and he sets the sandal down beside its partner beneath the pallet with the quiet satisfaction of a small task completed well. There is nothing left to do. The day, which began in darkness and silence on this same pallet so many hours ago, has completed its long, full, unhurried arc, and it has arrived back at its starting point. The same darkness, the same silence, the same firm surface of woven reeds beneath the same body, which is now heavier and warmer, and more deeply tired than it was at dawn, but which is also repaired and nourished, and entirely at peace. He lies back. The reeds press against his shoulders and spine with their familiar unyielding firmness, and the folded crimson cloak receives the weight of his head with a dense, wool-scented softness that is the closest thing to luxury this room contains. He draws the coarse wool blanket up over his chest and legs, and feels its weight settle onto his body, heavy and warm and enveloping, pressing him gently downward into the pallet, and the sensation is one of being held, firmly and securely, by the simple, unadorned materials of his daily life. He does not think about tomorrow. There is no need. Tomorrow will be identical to today, and today was identical to yesterday. And this knowledge, which might seem oppressive to a mind accustomed to novelty and variety, is instead the deepest source of peace he knows. The routine is not a cage. It is a foundation, as solid and as permanent as the stone walls of the barracks themselves. And resting upon it, the mind is free to release its hold on the future entirely, to let go of anticipation and planning and speculation, and simply exist, here, now, in this body, on these reeds, beneath this blanket, in this room, in this city that sits in the heart of the most defensible valley in all of Greece, ringed by mountains on every side, guarded by men who have trained since childhood for no other purpose, a city that has never been taken, never been breached, never been threatened with any seriousness by any force in the known world. And this knowledge settles into the deepest part of his awareness, like a stone settling to the bottom of a still pool. And it rests there, solid and immovable, and he feels entirely, completely, unshakably safe. The lamp has been extinguished. The darkness in the barracks is total now, a darkness so complete and so soft that it feels almost like a substance, something that can be touched and held and rested within. And into this darkness come the sounds of the night. They arrive quietly, one by one, each one taking its place in the silence without displacing anything that was there before. The wind comes first. It moves through the olive grove outside the barracks with a low, continuous, rustling whisper, a sound made of 10,000 individual leaves, turning and brushing against their neighbors, in a rhythm that has no beginning and no end, a sound so steady and so even that after a few moments the ear ceases to hear it as a collection of separate events, and begins to hear it as a single, unbroken tone, a soft, green, breathing hum that fills the space between the walls and the sky and the earth. And then, beneath the wind, or perhaps woven through it, comes another sound, more distant, more rhythmic, more human. It is the sound of footsteps, slow, measured, evenly spaced footsteps on packed earth, the footsteps of the night watch, making their unhurried rounds along the perimeter of the barracks. A pair of men walking in step with each other, their pace steady and calm, their presence a final quiet confirmation that the world outside is secure and ordered and at peace. The footsteps pass slowly, growing louder for a moment as they approach the nearest wall, each footfall a soft, muted percussion on the dry earth. And then they fade, gradually, step by step, receding into the distance until they are barely distinguishable from the sound of the wind itself, and then not distinguishable at all, and then gone. And then they return, minutes later, the same slow rhythm, the same steady approach, the same gradual fading. A cycle that will repeat all through the night, as reliable and as ceaseless as the turning of the stars overhead. His breathing has slowed. Each inhale is long and deep and effortless, drawing the cool, stone-scented air of the barracks into his lungs in a slow, expansive wave that lifts his chest against the weight of the blanket and then recedes, equally slowly, in an exhale that carries with it the last faint traces of tension, the last residual flickers of waking consciousness, releasing them into the darkness where they dissolve and vanish. His limbs are heavy, his eyelids are heavy. The sounds of the wind and the distant footsteps and the quiet breathing of the men around him have blended into a single, seamless, murmuring hum that is neither sound nor silence, but something between the two, a threshold, a border, the last thin line between the waking world and the deep, dark, boundless country that lies just beyond it. He crosses this line without knowing he has crossed it. One breath he is here, in the barracks, on the reeds, in the warm darkness, and the next breath he is gone, carried downward into a sleep that is as deep and as dark and as dreamless as the earth beneath the stone floor. A rest so total and so complete that the body and the mind become indistinguishable from the silence that holds them, and the night continues, vast and quiet and unhurried, over the valley of Laconia, over the river, over the mountains, over everything.